There are moments in life when we have to try to make a decision about who we will be and how we will show up in the world. And as you go through different elements in time, that doesn't always work out well. But today, I have someone that's going to share you some information about how she walked through elements of her identity. Hey now, how is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries with Tanya E. Hood. I have a special guest joining me today, Miss Annie B. Mayfield. Hey, Annie. Now, for those of you that have not yet had the opportunity to meet Annie, she is a 5-time Amazon bestseller and corporate account executive. She is also the host of the Made to Shine podcast that has listeners in over 62 countries and was a top 15% globally streamed Spotify podcast in 2024. She has been featured in Forbes magazine and the New York Journal for her efforts to remind the younger generation how divinely loved they are so that they may shine their spirit in all that they do. Annie, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience about you today?
Oh man, Tanya, that was an amazing introduction. You are so good at what you do. I think the only thing I would share is just, it's really easy when you listen to an introduction like that on someone's highlights to think that they have everything figured out. And that is not my intent on being here today. I just want to remind people I am so imperfect. I make mistakes every single day, but I have just found there is a heavenly Father that redeems all and uses all for good. And because I know that, I've had his strength to do all those things. And so my goal is just to remind other people they can do the same.
Oh, I love that. Now, for those of you that are listening, I have often said that you don't have to believe in a God as share, but if you let Jesus join you on the journey, you'll get strength and insight than you ever imagined. And Annie, it sounds like he has given you an opportunity to get a renewed identity. Would you like to share a little bit about how you have reset?
Yeah. And I love that word reset because the Bible talks so much about training and learning and molding and growing. And when I first read those kind of scriptures, whether it's the Psalms in the Old Testament or in the New Testament, Matthew writing, it reminds me that these things aren't natural, right? It's not our natural tendency to just come into this world and, make perfect decisions and do everything right. Our natural tendency is to stray, especially from Jesus, especially from good. That's our natural inclination in this kind of fallen world, if you will. But I think in my own life, I say this knowing not everybody's going to have my story. My hope is by sharing with you the specific ways I've had to learn how to reset, you take these principles and apply it to your own thing. So for me in my life growing up, as a young girl, I very much saw images and read books and saw movies of the way I should look and what I should have and what I should accomplish. And when I was younger, that took form in an eating disorder, and not just an eating disorder, but wanting to have control, having the best boyfriend, the best grades, the best happy-go-lucky all the time personality, the best highlights in my hair, the best, all of these things I felt like I needed to be enough. And that was my identity. Move on to college. I had to be in the lineup. I went to college and I played tennis. I had to be one of the best people in the lineup. I had to win a certain amount of matches. I had to, again, keep up with this body image of looking the way that I felt like was attractive and good enough. And then I graduated. And then the same insecurity of just being good enough constantly followed me. It just took on different expressions. For me, it was body image, whatever have you, relationships, friendships. For other people, it might be they live through their kids. Their kids have to achieve a certain thing, or they have to be in the best relationship. They have to have the best marriage, or at least be seen that way, the best business. And resetting for me, it's kind of twofold. There have been times where I've been so broken, I've been forced to reset. Because I look at sometimes we have to be humble to the point where we're forced to reset in God's kindness to recognize nothing outside of us is going to give us worth. Only our Heavenly Father can do that. The other way I've reset it in my life is choosing to give up things before they break me, right? It's like sometimes we're forced to break before we reset. Other times we make the brave, scary decision to, before we fully break, we're like, I think this thing is going to break me. I think this relationship's going to break me. I think whatever. And because of that, we willingly give up that. And so it's kind of twofold, Tanya. It's like, regardless of whether you're choosing to or you're forced to, it's just recognizing there is nothing out here that can give you the firm backbone of making you worthy enough. Only your Heavenly Father can do that.
Oh, I love that so much. Now, let's share a few things, because for the people that listen to me, some of them may recognize some of the conversation that you're having, but not everybody does. So there's a couple of things I want to unpack and just pull into where people are sitting today. With some of the pieces that you were sharing, we have society give us a thought about our identity. Yeah. And it sounds like you went through that with the body shaming and all the various things. And you had to walk through an experience of saying, hey, this is not who I am. And it sounds to me like you found your identity and getting clarity about who you are at the core of your being by who Jesus says you are. Yeah. Now, one of the things I want to bring to your attention is, if you aren't familiar with the God that we serve and your identity gets tied into other things, there are strategies and elements that you can seek to move into a different direction. Let's unpack some of the pieces, because you shared a whole lot with everybody about your journey, about your walk, about your talk, and thank you. Thank you so much for being so open with this and giving this insight. But let's walk into that first piece, the body image. Because with the filters and the social media, and now that we are walking into a brand new year with brand new things, people are trying to put on their best. Yeah. How? Did you get a tap on your shoulder, that insight in your being that says, hey, you are better than this? That thing that you're looking at, that moment that you see, that's not really you. Let's walk and unpack that a little bit to get to your journey.
I was reading this morning, and it was talking about how in the days of the Bible, when a woman being able to give birth, like being able to be with child, was seen as God's favor on your life. To them, that was like, I feel like what they worshiped with their body, was being able to get pregnant, to have a baby. I feel like that same thing, that same desire, that same I'm good enough kind of feeling has taken the expression in today's day and age of looking a certain way, right? Like being thin enough, being sculpted enough. So even when I say the body that I wanted, that I thought was beautiful, someone else might look at that body and be like, what are you talking about? You have right now the body that I think is beautiful. All that to say, I was reading, what I thought was so interesting was this author I was reading was talking about how God, when he made Adam and Eve, for those who don't know, those are the first two, like the two kids of God, so to speak, the first two humans of creation. He called them very good before Eve ever was pregnant with child. Eve was very good simply because she was made in the image of God. Not because she was able to get pregnant, not because she was able to do something with her body. If I was speaking to myself, which is kind of, if we're going back to that reset and what that conversation looked like, for me, it's, Annie, your body is beautiful, not because it looks a certain way, not because it does a certain thing or doesn't do a certain thing or is injured or is healthy. It is beautiful because it is made in the image of God, broken or healed, pregnant or not. And going back to, like, if I'm just being real, Tanya, I think so many of us, we know that, but there's a gap between our brain and our heart. It's like, I can say this to you all day, but if you're anything like me, because I had people tell me this all day, and I couldn't, it was like this deeply rooted sin, this deeply rooted desire to just be good enough in an avenue outside of God. God had to break me. And I think that broke his heart. But what I mean by that is, for me to get this ideal body to look a certain way, if we're going to go down the body image route, it involved excessive amounts of exercise. I mean, hours and hours a day. And I shattered my knees, like I couldn't even move. And it was in that time that I couldn't move. Diagnosis was not good. Things were not looking good. My vice for feeling good enough, for getting that hit of worthiness, I couldn't do it. It was in that time I, out of desperation, was like, okay, God, like I can't manipulate the situation anymore. I can't control it anymore. What do you have for me? Because obviously my way has led to nothing but brokenness. And it wasn't instant. And Tanya, I think that's important for people to know, because you mentioned we live in a social media world. We live in especially 2025 New Year's resolutions. It's all I see on Instagram right now is people working out, doing their thing, wanting their best life. But what about the people who can't? What about the people who physically can't go live their best life right now because they're in the hospital or they got a diagnosis that's not good? And I think in this day and age, we have comparison. We also have this idea that things come super quick. We have a microwave society. You put your goals in the microwave, you set it for 15, and they come out looking like a beautiful bronzed whatever lasagna from Lean Cuisine. It's like beautiful. That is not our God. Our God is a crock pot God. Like, things have got to sizzle. Things take time. Things take preparation. And so what I would tell my friend right now that's in that season or about to go into that season or just came out of a season like that is Romans 8:28. For those who don't know that scripture verse, God works all things together for the good of those that love and serve him. If it's not good, God's not done. But God's good for you might not look like you're good for you. And I promise you, it's better than it could ever have been imagined in your head. But it takes time, and it requires resetting. It requires intention. Sometimes it requires being broken, so you have to surrender, but it will always require surrender.
And that's the part that we often don't like to deal with.
Yep.
Because for some of the individuals that I speak to, they're in situations where you got inside this relationship because you were thinking, oh, I look this way. There must be love. He looks like that. She looks like that. So those were the connecting factors. But we often forget that part of the connecting factors are those things that already reside in who you are, that loving, giving heart, soul that you already bring to the table. That is a part of your image. So if we start changing and directing our identity away from more of the physical pieces, because we live in a society that is a lot of materialistic and physical elements, but the pieces that really resonate with you and those around you that you know that really helps you stay better connected, that identity is often the internal parts. So when you, Annie, got beyond the body image piece, when you were looking at this is how I look, this is what I think the world should see me as. So for some individuals that were in that vision and that thought of their identity with the world in their body, you may have been in that season, a wilderness moment covered in darkness, until you can get some assurance and some understanding, and to go back to the beginning that Annie was sharing. Some of those names that some of you may be familiar with. Those individuals went through a season where they had to go through a ripping. Some parts of your life will put you in a season where you go through a ripping, and it is in that ripping that you have to get birthed into a new identity. So Annie, when you came out of the season of the body shaming, what was the ripping that gave you the new identity, not to let your body be your identity, but something else?
Yeah. I think in life, there's two motivators, right? There's two motivating factors. You're motivated by something good. Like you're like, I'm so excited for that thing. I guess along the lines of body image, this is why, like, I'm engaged. And so a great example of this is I talk to a lot of friends that are engaged, and they are so excited for their wedding. They're motivated to get into shape, right? Like, they want to look good, feel good, which is awesome. I think a more intimate motivator that a lot of us in our darkest seasons, in the ripping that you're speaking to, Tanya, are probably more familiar with, is the pain motivator. And what I mean by that is, when I think about the darkest moments of my life, the moments where I look in the mirror and it's like, I can't stay here. I don't recognize this person. I don't know how I'm going to get myself out of this ditch that I literally put myself in. The pain motivator is, in that ripping that you're speaking to, is like, okay, Lord, I don't know what it's like to fully put my identity in you. That's scary because I can't control that. I can't see that. I know it's not going to come fast. It's not instant gratification like a workout is, or like whatever is, like what a relationship is, or a friendship is, or getting the grade or the promotion, for whatever have you. But I know that where I am right now is so painful. The pain of not giving this to you, the pain of putting my identity in you, which can be painful. Like, no one talks about that, especially Christians. They don't talk about how it's very hard to put your trust in a God that you can't see, that you can't touch, right? Like, that's hard because you can't see it. Even Jesus said, blessed are not those that see me now. Blessed are those that haven't seen, because he knows how hard it is. But the pain of staying where I am is so much greater than the temporary discomfort of giving my entire identity to a God that I can't see the next step. I can't see 5 steps down the road. I can only see this little toe step, if you will. Like God said, my word is a lamp unto your feet, not the lamp of the entire staircase. All that to say, Tanya, I think in my ripping moments, it's like I have no idea what the next big thing is going to look like. But I know, God, if I don't put my identity in you, the pain of staying where I'm at is too great. Like, I can't handle it. And I think we all come face to face with that recognition. It's like, okay, I have no idea what my life is going to look like after I leave this job, or leave this country, or leave this friendship, or this toxic relationship. But I do know that the pain of staying here is so much greater than the temporary pain of I have no idea what I'm doing. And so that was the ripping for me. And that's always been the ripping for me, is I can't really see the full staircase. And so many of us feel that way when we're in that ripping. It's, oh my gosh, God, oh my gosh, do you really have this? But our God is so good, and he's so able, and he's so stable for us. He knows that about us. He calls us sheep for a reason. Like, our attention is all over the place, but God's a good shepherd.
And this is the part I'm glad that you made that comment, because there will be things in our life that we will have to tread through. There's a place that you have coming from that wasn't working well for you, be it that relationship, be it that old body image, those things that people told you, a past that nearly broke you. Mm-hmm. That is your old place that you're leaving. But that new spot, like you were talking, that new place that you're walking to, if you think of it as a staircase, we can all visualize a staircase and have faith that the staircase will actually get to the next level, even if we have sections of it blocked away. So this new thought process about putting your identity into Jesus, a God that for some may never really heard, a God for that some people have sort of, with their behavior, given a whole different perspective about who he is, because there's this conversation that I know I have walked through with church hurt because of the church mafia. That was something that was my experience. And if that is an experience that many have walked through, the last thing that you want to do is, after all of this pain and all of this chaos, want to walk into a relationship with a God that has that, with people that does that, with things that does that. How do I go through really trusting that on the other end of that staircase, there will be something greater, while I'm still watching my world live on each side of me that is colliding, and I can't quite get true certainty that the other side will be better and I'll make it through unscathed. With that as a thought, having speaking to this younger generation with their, like you were saying, we have a crock pot God, but for a lot of them, they have that microwave moment about who Jesus is, and the identity of putting that into him. That's not something that they think should be done. How do you help the young generation that you support get a greater understanding about who God is, so that they can shine their light?
Oh my gosh. That is so good. 2 things. One, you mentioned church hurt, and I'm so glad that you did, because this is something I get very passionate about. As a young adult that did not go to church for a long time because of that very thing, I've always loved God. I've always had a personal relationship with God. And I, like many young adults, was scared of church because I was scared people were going to ruin it for me. Like, that's literally how I thought. And I think a lot of the young adults feel like that. Do not confuse God's people with God. do not confuse church people with God. Those are two very different things. And a pastor of mine once said that there's no such thing as church hurt, only people hurt. The reality of it is we live in an imperfect world. We live in a fallen world. We live in a world with people that do really mean things, whether they say they know the Lord or don't. You can't escape getting hurt, whether you're in a church, whether you're in a bar, whether you're in a university, or whether you're at your family dinner table. You can't escape hurt because we're all people and we are all imperfect. There is no such thing as a professional Christian. Only one person gets the title of professional Christian and doing it all right all the time. That is Jesus Christ. And there's a reason he and he alone was good enough to die for us and die for all of our imperfections, because he was perfect. All of us, whether you have known the Lord for 60 years or 6 hours or never, we are all trying to figure it out. All that to say, Tanya, when I did take a chance on church, and you have to find the right one, it took years for me to see the fruit of that. Going back to microwave versus crock pot, I joined a church, I started volunteering. It wasn't until 3 years later, I was like, wow, I really love my church. And that was this past year. I met my fiance at church. I've met some of my best friends at church, but it took 3 years of being planted. And that's the thing. I think a couple of things. You mentioned young adults knowing who God is. You got to plant yourself. Like, what are you rooted in? Roots take time to grow, and you can be rooted in the things of this world if you want, but that will guarantee you an eternity of suffering. Like, I've been wrestling with this thought a lot. God offers us a life of temporary suffering. This life is, there will be suffering. No one's inept from suffering. Jesus said that. This life will be hard. Jesus said that. So one, to my young adults, don't confuse a hard time with God not being real, with God not being a parent, with God not being with his hand on you. That if anyone had the right to feel that way, it was Jesus. Like, Jesus had one of the hardest lives you could possibly have, and he died the most gruesome death. And God said, this is my son for whom I'm well pleased. So suffering does not equate to God not being real and God not being with you. Suffering does refine you. And God says, hey, I'm so good of a God. I know life is hard. This suffering, I'm going to use it for good. And not only that, but if you keep your eyes on me, you will have eternity of bliss. What the world offers is temporary bliss, temporary glory, temporary hits of feeling good enough with ways that cannot fill us: drugs, sex, alcohol, eating disorders, body image obsession, whatever it is, for an eternity of suffering. And so to my young adults, I would say, hey, you're gonna break in this world. You are. But there's a Japanese art that I love. It's called kinitsu, I'm pretty sure. I might have botched that. But the whole idea of it is that it takes broken pottery and it puts it back together with gold, making it more valuable than it was before it broke. And that's how I look at our God. And that's how I think young adults should look at our God is, hey, you're going to break in this world, but God is in the business of taking your broken parts and putting them back together to something more valuable than you were before. I think about my life right now. Like, I'm going through some medical stuff again, and I'm waiting on some MRI results. And that's been really hard. I'm in the in-between. I'm in the, I don't know. It could be really bad. It could be really fine. I don't know. But I'm telling you, as someone who's literally in the in-between of answers, we have a God that I know it's going to be okay. Because even if it's not for a little while, it will be in the long run. Because God keeps his word. And he says he will use all things for good for those that love him. And so to my friends, I would say, get yourself around people that encourage you in that regard. And remember, God is in the business of redeeming all things and taking broken pottery and making it more valuable than it ever was. If you are suffering, chances are that's an honor. Like in the Bible, suffering was used to refine people and to make people realize that there is nothing in this world that can fill me but the Lord. Comfort, I think, is one of the most deadly things we can experience. I'm not saying it's bad to be comfortable, but I'm saying nonstop comfort you're never really aware of like what God does for you. If you always feel like you're in control and can make your life comfortable, it's an honor to experience discomfort, because it's typically in the discomfort we see God the most. And so if you can reframe your mindset from, man, God hates me because I'm going through so much, to, man, God is trusting me with this really hard time. How is he going to use it? It'll change your life.
Well, first, we praying for you as you go through.
Thank
And I love your spirit that God has
you.
given you. And that thought that you have shared with others, with what you're experiencing. When people are walking through their pain and their hurt, and they know that in some regards, church should be the place to go and heal. And I'm glad that you've got a great relationship, and congratulations on your engagement. But I would like for those of you that are listening to think of church like this, because this is what helped me after I went through my experience. Now, a lot of you know my religious roller coaster ride. I've been a Mormon, a Catholic, a Scientologist, a Buddhist, an Egyptologist, and all the various non-denominationals, Pentecostal, Baptist, Lutheran, all the stuff. Having walked through all of that journey, the thing that helped me be more centered in who I am today and how I function in God's house is finding a church. But another thought that can help you is recognizing that a church is simply a hospital for sick souls. If you think of it as a hospital where there are sick souls, but a hospital where there are those that can give you some strength, give you support, gird you up, the nursing facility, the cheerleaders along the way, the therapy center as well, that may give you a different perspective. And as you walk through this, as Annie has shared, relationships will be built. Because the thing about being a Christian is about relationships. They weren't always called Christians. It was way later, after Jesus had passed and risen up to heaven, that the people known in his church were called Christians. But before then, they were always called the way. The goal and the desire of getting an identity in who Jesus is to give you a thought process that you are a light. That is why he's made the statement, and Annie shared earlier, a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. Because inside of you, your identity is a light to somebody that you have walked through. There's a relationship that you have experienced that only you can tap into, that loving, supportive, caring, giving heart that you have. That is an identity that only you can give to someone else. Annie, I am grateful that you're sharing this and that you're helping. Can you give us a little more elements for those that not really sure about this thing called Jesus? Because I have a mixed audience of individuals. A lot of you are already aware of who I serve and how I function, but I also have a group that have gone through a space and a place where they're not really certain that this is the thing that I should be in and why. I shouldn't even listen to you any further, because this conversation today, it did not go like I thought. You started off this conversation having a whole discussion about identity, and we don't walk down this path of what? Give an element about how do you get here, and how, knowing that you're walking through something that is difficult, having had relationships that were tough, you've come out with this beautiful outlook on life. Share a little more.
That's good. Actually, and I love your story. I'm probably going to use you as an example for this, if you will. In the Bible, First Peter, who is a disciple of Jesus, talks about giving an account for your faith. I love that you mentioned how this was not always called Christianity or Christians. It was called the way, right? Because I think even the word Christians, like when people say, what do you believe? I say, I believe in Jesus. Like that. I don't say I'm a Christian. I don't say like I am a Christian, but like I aim to serve and follow. And I believe in Jesus. It was really my college years. I think we all had that moment where we are like, okay, do I actually believe this? Whether that is you believe in Jesus or you believe in whatever. I think we all have these wrestles inside where we're like, do I believe this? Or do I believe this because my parents do? Or do I believe this because my community does? And some people are not willing to look into those questions because it might risk their community. And I'm not saying that lightly. Like that's incredibly scary to basically start asking yourself questions against what everyone you know believes and what you've been told is the right thing to believe your whole life. But I was, I guess, one of those people, and it sounds like you were too, Tanya, where you were like, no, like, I actually want to look into this. I want to figure out, do I believe this? Like, if so, why do I believe this? And so to anybody listening that you're like, I don't know if I truly believe this. I don't know if I should. Maybe you've never heard of Jesus. I would say look into it. I did research. I looked into history books. I looked into Lee Strobel is one of my favorite writers. If you want like actual books to look into, I looked into Cold Case Christianity. A guy I had on my podcast who's actually a dear friend now, he basically went through, he was a homicide detective, and he went through the Gospels trying to prove them wrong. And he wrote a book about how he couldn't prove the Gospels wrong and how he could not prove that the eyewitness reports of Peter and of Mark and of John and of all these people saying they saw Jesus rise from the dead, he couldn't prove it wrong. A homicide detective that was a professional. I looked into it. I also read about other religions because it's important. It was a couple of years ago. I was really convicted. I was like, I've never really looked into Buddhism. I've never really, like, why do people believe that? Why is that something? And for me, what I landed on is, okay, first of all, if your view of Christianity is something that's not good, it's something that's judgmental, it's something that's hypocritical, I don't blame you. There's some of the most judgmental people I've ever met in my life are people that wore a cross necklace. And that's true. But I'm telling you, after researching every other way of believing, and this could bring tears to my eyes because I just know this to be true, Christianity is the only religion where we did not have to make our way up the mountain to get to God. God came down to us because he loved us so much. And he did what we could not because he wanted a relationship with us. And so I'll leave you with this. Please look into it. Do your own research. I'm not telling you what to believe, but I am saying that if you're against Christianity because you met hypocritical people and judgmental people, hey, I have too. I don't confuse God with those people. I don't confuse Jesus with those people. The Pharisees were people in the Bible that Jesus, if you read the Bible and you see Jesus get angry, it was always at the Pharisees, who were people that knew every single word of basically the Bible of the Old Testament. And he was so mad at them because he said, you know every single word, but you don't know the heart of God. And it is possible to know every single word of scripture and not know the heart of God. If someone messed up that message of Christianity for you, it's not the message of Christianity. This was always referred to as the good news. If the news of Jesus isn't good in your mind and in your heart, someone messed it up for you, because the news of Jesus is good news. It's the best news. It's news saying you don't have to make your way up. You don't have to kill yourself by doing these things and to get to God. No, God came down. God came down to you. Because before he wants you to do anything for him, he wants a relationship with you. You are a daughter before you are a servant. You are a son before you are an employee of God. You are in relationship with him first. And I have done my research. There is no other concept of God out there that God came down to us because he loved us to save us. So that's what I would land on.
And I'm glad that you're landing there, because here's the thing that we don't often consider with being what they say as a Christian. It is both a religion and a relationship, but it is more a relationship than it is religion, because religion is just those day-to-day things that you sort of walk through, and then you have some confines that give you a structure that does support. But it's a relationship that lets you know that I'm broken and I'm still loved. It is a relationship, like you were saying. It's kintsugi, which is a Japanese pottery building. That broken piece of who I am is sealed with that gold elements that you often see, which is Jesus weaving who he is with me in relationship. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for sharing that. And you have a gift that you want to give to my audience today. But before we begin, we have got to have a word from our sponsors. Sitting on the edge of my bed trying to figure out how did I get here, but I knew there was a way of getting through this. So I decided to do an autopsy on my marriage. Red Alert. Is he the one? The pocket guide to finding a love of your life. The free chapter is available for you in the link below. So Annie, tell us a little more about the gift that you have for our audience today.
Yes. So my latest devotional, You Matter, which was released a couple of months ago, they can click the link below and they will have a signed copy of this devotional. This devotional is really, it matters, for lack of a better word, a lot to me because it's all about kind of as a very achievement oriented person. It's reminding myself that nothing I can achieve outside of me, body image, promotion, corporate work, money amount, relationship, ring on my finger, nothing outside of me that I achieve can give me my worth. My worth was given in what Jesus achieved for me on the cross when he died because he loved me so much and then rose again to give me new life. And so this is a devotional kind of walking you through every day of reminders so you can really set that foundation for your morning, which will set it for the rest of the day, knowing that you are loved. And from that love, you can go and do and be the best mom you want to be, the best executive you want to be, the best wife you want to be, the best husband for the guys listening in, son, daughter, friend, whatever you have, to be able to do that effectively. So clicking the link below, it will take you to there and I will have a signed copy for you.
Well, thank you so much for that, Annie. I appreciate that. And so let's wrap this up. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave with our audience today?
I think final thoughts is just from one very imperfect girl to another person tuning in. I would just say your hard times don't define you. If you're like me, you're very good at being dramatic and exaggerating things. It's a gift and it's your biggest Achilles heel. It's very easy in a hard time to think this is always how it's going to be. I'm always going to struggle with this thing. I am always going to be going through this thing. This thing is never going to get any better. I just want to remind you, one, if you believe in the God that I do, which is the God whose son is Jesus Christ, who sent Jesus down and rose him again to give us new life. And if you don't, look into it, do your research. But if you do, God is in the business of taking broken things, as we've talked about, and making them better. This hard time will not be forever. And I guarantee you how you get through this hard time, whenever you do, whether it's days or weeks or months or years, you will be able to use that as a survival guide for somebody else that goes through that a couple years from now or at a later date from now. Nothing is wasted. No time is wasted. No injury is wasted. No conversation is wasted. No awkward silence is wasted. God is not in the business of just wasting things. God delights in you giving him your heart, surrendering to him so that he can go to work to crafting something better than you could have ever imagined. Yes, even with your broken times.
Oh, with that, thank you, Annie, so much for pouring into the audience today. And so for those of you that want to make certain that you see Annie, follow her. Go to her Linktree site. She has a whole list of things that you can connect with and get the opportunity to see that gift that she has for us today. Annie, appreciate you sharing your story and the empowerment that you give others to reset into the being that they're supposed to be into the world. And so for today, if you don't remember anything else that we've shared, here's some things that we want you to remember. You have the ability inside of you to reset who you are, gaining insight about your identity in a being greater than yourself. And for those of you that would like to go deeper, to get a little more understanding about the God that we serve, and let Jesus join you on the journey, feel free to reach out to either one of us. Where you feel better connected, where you feel more assurance, go there as well so that you can get some greater insight about who God is, so that identity that you have moving forward is the identity that will take you into better spaces and places. And so for today, if you are looking to have someone support you on the journey, feel free to go to my website, TanyaEHood.com. There you can click under the Work With Me tab and see the various ways that we can work with one another. And if you are on YouTube, you can join me live every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where we can continue the conversation or we can start a new one. In the meantime, this is Tanya E. Hood, walking in my purpose, and I want you to do the same.